Pursuing a music career is incredibly challenging, full of ups and downs, and can often lead to frustration and burnout that can lead artists to quit. But there is hope. In this episode, we're going to talk about why artists quit, but what you can do about it to keep thriving and avoid putting an end to that career.
You're listening
to the CD Baby
CD Baby
DIY
Musician Podcast.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 335 of the CD Baby DIY Musicians Podcast, where on today's episode, we're going to talk about why musicians quit, but what you can do to safeguard yourself against those thoughts and desires. My name is Kevin Bruner, and joining me is Chris Robley. Chris, how you doing?
Good. I'm really excited for this episode because I think, confronted all however many numbers of reasons musicians have to quit. I've faced them all. So
yeah.
And we're not just going to list them and then be like, and that's it. We understand why it sucks. As you said, we'll also have a spin on how to deal with it and not quit.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I was thinking about one day and I actually asked ChatGPT, why do musicians quit? And it brought up one of the things on the list. I will not reveal it yet. One of the things on the list was something that I wouldn't have thought of, but is absolutely true. And I think it's an important discussion to have because it can be a discouraging journey. And but when you recognize those feelings and understand what's causing them, then you can do something about them. So we'll get into all of that soon. How's everything else going for you, Chris? You're about to go on a month-long sabbatical.
I go on a little break and make some music of my own. And what else am I going to do? Rest, sit on the couch and try to be bored for once. Do you remember what it was like to be bored?
Yeah,
such a wonderful
vaguely.
Anyways, I'm hoping to at least have one moment of boredom. But making some music. I've got a bunch of acoustic songs. I've got a bunch of sort of synthesizer, electronic type stuff. I don't know how much I'll get done, but hopefully I'll have a handful of things ready to ship to the mixing engineer.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I'm feeling excited as well. It feels like a season of lots of new stuff potentially. Like you and I have been helping some artists plan campaigns and doing some strategy sessions and coaching. And people have heard me talk about me recording with Melody Ryan, her first single. By the time this podcast drops, it might be release week for her. And so just a lot of exciting stuff happening there. Small Town Poets, we're gearing up to record our next album. We have a whole folder full of pre-production and songs, and got a couple shows we're booking for the summer that are coming together. And yeah, it just feels like heading into a season of just awesomeness. So
is this going to be a Small Town Poets original album or a Christmas album? It will be
no more Christmas albums. We're done with that.
Your 14th
done with that. Album? No, we had 2 Christmas albums and a couple. We like doing Christmas
and a Christmas EP. You have 2.5 Christmas albums, don't you?
No, we have 2 with like 3 singles that we've done separately. But yeah, we're not a Christmas band, Chris. But yeah, so we've got that gearing up, and we'll probably start production on this summer. And yeah, just lots of good music stuff going on that I'm excited about. Speaking of, I mentioned that Chris and I have been doing some mentoring sessions and consultations and stuff. If you're interested, follow us on social. If you're watching on YouTube, our handles are on the screen. If not, I am at K Bruner, the letter K, BREUNER on Instagram and TikTok. And Chris is at Chris Robley. If you go to mine right now, in the link in bio, you can sign up for a free 20-minute strategy session. I've been talking with artists. It's been a lot of fun just learning what their needs are and just trying to help where I can. And there's no sales pitch. I'm not selling anything. I don't have anything to sell. So it's just been fun to connect with artists on that level and want to throw it out there. So,
and this is a random thought on that subject, but one thing I notice a lot when I do those mentoring sessions at conferences and stuff is like, sometimes the artist already has the answer, but they just need to bounce it off someone. So a lot of times we're just there to be like, oh, you know what? You're already on track. Keep going, or like make a few tweaks. But I just think the artist needs to see themselves reflected in something in a way. So if 20 minutes has got to be enough to do that, at least if all they need is a sounding board.
Yeah, and it's interesting because every artist I've talked to so far has been completely different and in different parts of the world. Last night I had a session with someone who was in Northern Ireland, and the opportunities and abilities to do various things are extremely different than an artist I talked to the previous week that was in San Diego. Very different. So it's been fascinating to hear people's stories and help out. And yeah, you're right. A lot of times it's like, I just have these ideas. Is this dumb? Is this, and then just getting some help along the way. So yeah, that's been fun. So yeah, check out at Chris Robley, at K Bruner, and follow at CD Baby. But if you connect with Chris and I, you'll be able to keep up with what we're doing, because there's some interesting things we've got brewing.
Speaking of us and mentorship and CD Baby, we have an amazing event coming up.
That's right. Yes, the DIY Musician VIP experience. We have a slide you can put on the screen, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
For the people watching on YouTube. Yeah, there it is. May 18th through 20th in Nashville, Tennessee. It's going to be an awesome event. The first day, when you buy your ticket, which is just $149, the first day gives you access to the last day of the Music Biz Conference, which is going to be artist focused. That is like the premier music biz conference for the industry. So you'll be able to go to that on Thursday. Tickets for that are normally $1,800. Obviously, you only get the last day, but still, that's a deal in of itself. Then Friday, we have small group mentoring, networking, and more sessions planned. But really, the idea is to connect people, both to industry people and other artists. So we're keeping it very limited. Only 300 tickets for sale. It will sell out. We're selling quite a few. So if you want to go, get your tickets right away. And then if you want one more day for an extra $30, on Saturday, we're going to be doing the Tom Jackson live performance makeover. You've seen the live band makeover. This will be a 4-hour session that will be him working with smaller situations, solo artists, smaller group settings, and working with people and pulling people up out of the audience. I've been to this one as well before. It is high quality and worth the extra $30, hands down. So that gives you 3 days. We'll have an open mic on one of the nights, and we're looking for other fun and shenanigans that we can all do together while we're there. It's going to be a lot of fun. So
yeah, the thing I'm really excited about with the Tom Jackson thing is, as a performer who sometimes is solo in the corner of a restaurant or something, and there's no stage, there's probably no dedicated musician lighting, you might be doing your own sound. You probably can easily fall into this attitude of like, well, what can I do to put on a show? Essentially, I'm just background music for drunks. But Tom Jackson totally works with, smaller motions you can do, props, the arc of your set, all this stuff that actually have a huge impact, even when it's just like you and a guitar.
Yeah, and I like the format, because what you just mentioned, like the format is such that people can be like, hey, Tom, but what about this? Let's talk about, I'm in this type of situation all the time. There's room for back and forth. It'll be 4 hours, it'll be 2 hours. We'll take a break and then 2 more hours. So it will be high quality. So again, head on over to, I don't think I gave the URL yet. DIYmusiciancon.com. Get your tickets. It's $149. Find some people to stay with in Nashville or get a hotel. I think Chris and I are getting an Airbnb and cramming it with friends. We'll see. But it's going to be a great time. Nashville at this time is always crazy, just buzzing with everything.
And you already said this, but music biz is like probably is the premier music industry event. And so Nashville's already crazy. It's going to be extra crazy because of that. And then we'll bring our DIY indie musician craziness to the mix.
Yeah. And so for like the open mic, we're going to be inviting a lot of our industry friends that we know are in town to come out and hang out, that may not even be attending the conference, but that we want them to come check out the music. So it'll be worth your time and effort to be there. That's why we're calling it VIP. We're really trying to make it more of a connecting place than just a mega conference where you might feel lost in the crowd. All right, well, let's dive in. Why musicians quit. It's funny. I don't even know why this thought popped into my head and why I even mentioned, like I mentioned at the top that I did a chat GPT search. Like it was when I was first messing around with chat GPT and I was trying to stump it. Like it doesn't know this or that, and trying to find things that it can't just pull from the web. And I felt like the stuff it returned was actually pretty dead on. I added some stuff to the list and changed around. I didn't use everything that it said, but it really got me thinking about the idea of, being an artist is hard, and so many people give up for various reasons. And acknowledging that and maybe talking about it and being honest about it and maybe putting in some safeguards or things that you can do. And even in some cases, just giving yourself permission to take a break.
Yeah.
But you don't have to I quit, like hit that wall of frustration where you just sell all your gear and get into real estate. I've met so many ex-musicians that do real estate.
I'm thinking of one in particular who goes by the rock and roll realtor. But actually, he didn't give up music. He just added it supplemental.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not knocking real estate agents. It's just that's one thing that I've seen as a trend. So let's dive in. First up, I think this is the obvious one. First up, number one, lack of financial stability. Can be a struggle to make a living wage, which is a struggle in any creative field. When you're dealing with something that's subjective, that's based on personal tastes, it can be really hard compared to going into business for things that people need to survive. Like, I don't know why I thought of this, but I live in a small town outside of Portland, Oregon called Camas, Washington. And when you come into town, there is a massive paper mill in town. And that's really what the town ran on for many years. Everybody worked at the paper mill. And so for a lot of people, that kind of thing is like, everybody needs paper. Everybody needs toilet paper. We make that. So we will have jobs forever. Where music is subjective. People don't have to have music, although I would argue that point. But that's how a lot of people view things. And so it can feel very unstable, even just with the financial prospects of it.
Yeah, and I think it's unstable in a few different ways. Like, so for one, artists who are kind of just at the start, they're building something, they want to be full-time eventually, but they're not there yet. They don't sustain a living on touring or selling their own music in various capacities. So there's a lot of hustle that's involved in building your music pursuit into an actual career. And all that hustle takes so much time that you may think to yourself, well, I have to have flexible jobs. I have to make whatever living I can. I have to work part-time jobs or freelance jobs. And then that so even if you have, quote, a day job, it's unstable. It's all over the place. It's tough to, like if you have like a serious career, you have to prove yourself in that job capacity to some degree, which probably means you're not giving your all to music. So then there's that struggle of how much to give to the job, how much to put into your music. And that's the struggle at the start of these things. But on the flip side, I have a lot of friends who, in my mind, sort of succeeded. They've been in bands that toured the world, are massive, like are practically household name type artists. And a lot of them sadly reach a point where they're like, even that isn't steady enough in this way where like, I want to keep doing it. So then they end up pursuing a career, when they're 45 or 60 or whatever, because there are other challenges about just even sustaining the career. I'm just saying finances are tough even when you are succeeding is sort of my point.
Yeah. Well, I like the first point that we have, like, because we're gonna name the reason why people quit, and then we've got bullet points on how to deal with those things. And I think this one, part of it's giving yourself permission. Like, don't put so much pressure on yourself to be that full-time living out of the gate, or maybe even ever. I think what frustrates me most about people stepping into music is a craft. And that's something that you get better at over time. You might be a young virtuoso, and you're already 100 levels above where I am at this point in my career. You still have room to grow, and you're still going to get better and have more experiences and things that it's a craft. So you've got to understand that it takes time to grow and build on that. And that should be, to me, one of the top metrics, that you're growing and getting better, not necessarily how much money you're bringing in. Because if you put it all on money, then the craft is probably suffering in a way that keeps you from growing, that inhibits you from making money.
Yeah.
It's this weird cycle that happens when you expect something you did once, like your first album, it didn't make me piles of cash. Well, you need to focus on getting better and writing better songs. Like, if you heard some of the first song demos that and early albums that my band made before I was a part of Small Town Poets, they've been very other iterations. You would not, if it was like that first thing represents all the potential of their career, it would have been cutting everything short, because they changed and grew so much. And it takes time and effort to do that.
Well, yeah, it's worth pointing out that it is a craft. And I think we get so confused by what music needs to be and what our own music needs to be, because it's wrapped up in mass media. Like, oftentimes the music that moves us and reached us was delivered to us by mass media. So there's this overlap with expectations of entertainment, stardom, and all this stuff. But at its basic, music is a passion, a craft, a community activity. Like, there are amazing poets. Some of the most amazing poets in the world are all teachers. Like, there could be someone who's an amazing woodworker who actually makes their living as an accountant, but they make tables on the weekend or whatever. And the same thing can be true of music. Like, the best song ever written could have been written by a, quote, hobbyist. So I think it's good to remind ourselves of that. The other thing I wanted to mention about putting pressure on ourselves too soon to make a full-time living from music is that there's startup costs. And if you want to reach fans and you want to make a great album in a studio or whatever it is, like, it takes money. And sometimes if your music isn't paying the bills, well, you don't have that money to kind of invest or reinvest in your music. So having a separate day job can sometimes give you a little bit of, what's it called? Expendable income, discretionary. Yeah. Just some extra funds to like put towards your music in a way where, spending that money doesn't leave you in like a kind of dire, desperate position because the day job is dependable.
Yeah. And one of the notes we have here from a former boss of ours was like, they were talking about embracing the day job because that allows you the artistic freedom to be the artist you want to be, because you're not driven by money, which typically means commercial viability. And this person made very much what would be called outsider art.
Yeah.
And for them, it was total freedom, and it made their art transformative to them and the people who enjoyed it, because they weren't trying to, financial viability wasn't a guiding principle with the creation process.
And I think with so much music being made, that actually kind of embracing that, having the artistic freedom, total artistic freedom, because it's not paying the bills, may actually help you cut through the noise in a more, I don't know, effective way. And if you reach people, it might be because you're being the most authentic version of yourself. You're like totally unique. You're differentiated from everything else out there. So that may be another benefit from having a day job.
And the last thing I'll say on this point is I came from a situation where when I came off the road full time, we were playing probably about 150 shows a year. We'd been nominated for a Grammy, had lots of radio success, and I was making next to nothing. And ended up in the Northwest, and just to help make ends meet, I got a job at Starbucks. Starbucks was still sort of the cool Northwest indie coffee shop at that
Version of
time.
Starbucks.
They weren't the global dominant brand that they've become now, but everybody in the Northwest, every musician at that time had pretty much done a tour of duty at Starbucks. But the whole time I was there, all I could think about is how I wanted to be doing anything but working at Starbucks. I wanted to be making music. I was also doing photography at the time. And what I noticed is that it forced my brain to get very intentional with my time. And for whatever reason, it unlocked so much creativity. And I had the biggest creative spurt I've ever had in my life, where I was just like, I would go home and just write for hours on end. And some of the best stuff, some of the best growing period as a musician I've ever experienced. So sometimes putting you in that situation forces you to get like real with your time and be like, is this important to me? Am I really serious about this? Because some of us aren't making it happen because we're treating it like that it should be a given, or we say we want to do it, but we're not really all in. It made me go all in the biggest of ways.
Well, so you're talking about being resourceful with your time. And I think the same can be true of, since we're talking about financial stability, the same exact thing can be true of how you spend your money. So if you don't have a huge budget, you may have to do some of your own home recording and get really good at engineering skills or music production skills on your own out of necessity. Same thing could be true of marketing. If you only got, X amount of dollars to spend, you have to optimize what you're doing with those dollars. So in a way, it can be a little bit prohibitive or painful, but through that, I think you develop skills and learn how to, optimize your time and your money.
Yeah, because time is as big of a resource, and maybe more so now, even if you don't have much money. We have so much distraction and so much things being thrown in our face, distraction when we don't even want to be distracted. And probably through my whole music career, even until today, it's had varied levels of degrees of how much time and effort I'm putting into things. But what most people probably don't know is how much stuff I didn't do in order to focus on music. Like there's lots of times where I could have done, been hanging out all weekend long, doing this or that, but where I said, no, I've said, this is what I want to do. It takes sacrifice with my time as well. I have to say no to a lot of things in order to have the time to do it, especially as you get older and you have kids, you have other commitments, you have lots of things going on. You've really got to be protective of that time.
So if we summarize it all, in the face of financial struggles, celebrate your ability to be resourceful and creatively free.
Yeah, and don't put so much pressure on the amount of money your music makes equals the worth of your music, because that's what typically drives that conversation.
Yeah.
All right, number 2, difficulty gaining traction. I know a lot of artists fall into this, where the talent and songs may be there, but the lack of progress can lead to frustration and disappointment. And I think oftentimes the feeling of what's the point, and we've sort of tapped into this a little bit, but like write out other forms of currency besides money and clout, like fun, growth, connection, camaraderie, just joy. Playing music's awesome. Just the joy of playing music. I think just be happy with that.
Yeah. So I feel like in one way, people might be like, that sounds a little self-helpy, but I really think it's true. Because if you write out those other things, when you're experiencing them, it kind of helps you visualize different ways of getting paid than, like you said, clout and money. And you'll appreciate the things you do have. And so like camaraderie with collaborators, maybe you're playing to an empty bar, but man, like how amazing is it to be in a group of 3 or 5 or 8 people who you love and respect as musicians to get to make music together. And I know that's probably not as fun as doing the exact same thing to a full club and making thousands of dollars. But if that's all you're getting paid in right now, just still think of it as a currency in a way that can help you push through those doldrums. And one thing I was thinking of, I might tear up talking about it because it really moved me. But yesterday I went on Twitter and I saw this tweet from a New York Times writer who had published a book and was on a book tour. Did you see this?
Mm-mm.
So she shared a picture of the bookstore where she was reading that night. And there were 4 or 5 rows of chairs, and literally every one of them was empty. And she said, if you want to know what failure looks like, it's this. I drove home crying, and I cried all night, or something like that. And so first I was moved by her vulnerability to be like, literally no one showed up to my reading at this bookstore. What has my life become? Like, that takes a kind of bravery. But then what really made me like start crying is all these other writers who are very respected and have, professional careers, basically all shared their photos, or at least their experiences of the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And so out of this, quote, failure, she was made to feel totally part of a community, less alone, and came out on the other side being like, oh yeah, shit, the next town I do this in, it could be full, because I remember that I've done other readings that are worthwhile. And so it was just a beautiful moment. So here I am crying.
Yeah. But now you got me all tearing up too. But that's one thing with music, is that we've said it before, you're gonna face rejection and have disappointment. Some of the shows you do that you think are going to be amazing. I remember one show that we did a few years back where everything looked like it was going to be an amazing night. And it happened to be at a church gig. And then it turned out it happened to be the same weekend as this person, very well-known person from the church, who was marrying a famous musician who's in a group that's still very famous right now.
It's always the famous person playing down the street that ruins you.
So they all went to the wedding and the room was almost empty. And you're like, everything looked like it was going to be good. And then sometimes it's just circumstances, and you're going to face that. And, we've been talking about booking shows with my band for the summer. And so there's a lot of back and forth. Like, what's the point? Because we have a lot of we'll have some amazing shows, and then we'll have some that's like, I left my family, and our drummer was like, I have to justify this to my family. I'm here, and there's nobody here, and I could, because he travels a lot for work, and anyway, I just always go back to I think it was there's a quote from Fred Armisen that's like, whether you're playing a sold out show or just 10 people, playing music is awesome, and the fact that you get to do that is awesome. And just remember that, because it's so unpredictable. And so a lot of time these discouragements, I think what forces or gets people thinking about quitting is they feel like they're alone. So I appreciate the story you shared, because it's like, I think a lot of artists, and why going to things like our DIY musician VIP experience to me is so important, because you meet other artists and you feel so seen, and that you're a part of a community that knows what it feels like. And even though you may have friends and family that supports you, it's really hard to really understand what it feels like to put yourself out there like a musician does, and feel like you're not just being played for a fool at times.
And then again, it's worth remembering that even people that you look up to as successful and who have, quote, made it, deal with some version of this same stress and same frustration. Maybe it's not a completely empty club, but maybe that night they didn't sell out and it was half full. And to them, they start wondering, is my career over? What does this mean in this town? Did we do a bad job marketing?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, I mean, the bigger you get, the more is on the line. So it's like you see a very popular band playing to a room that's 3/4 full, and you're thinking amazing. They're thinking, oh crap, we didn't make the ticket limit tonight. We don't get paid. This is tens of thousands of dollars of production on the stage here. We're not making money tonight. So those stresses are there, and I have experienced that big time. So that the other thing is, do we have any other how to deal with like that disappointment thing that we want to talk about?
I don't know. I just think just write down that list of other ways in which you're being rewarded for the struggle, so that when you're going through the struggle, you've gone through an exercise that reminds you of why it's worth it. And that's not to say like if you play 15 years of empty shows, you maybe shouldn't reassess what you're doing.
Yeah, there is time for reassess.
But if it's a phase of struggle, then I think that can help you push through to get to the point where you're actually getting paid and money and praise and all the other good things about being successful.
Yeah. All right. Number 3 on the list is burnout. And I started to talk about this a bit. Musicians have a demanding schedule, and all the touring, recording, and promotion can be exhausting, which, if unchecked, will absolutely lead to burnout. And I hit this big time, like so hard. That's why I walked away from touring full time. I felt like I was no longer human because we were going nonstop. An average day for us would look like pulling into a town for a 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. drive time radio show, maybe in the town we're playing, or maybe some town along the way, doing an in-store performance before lunch, grabbing lunch, doing another in-store performance after lunch, sound checking, doing meet and greets, doing the show, doing an after thing, and then doing it all over again. And it's awesome. But the one thing that, that really hit hard and made me understand some of the positions, I had seen with artists who struggled with drug addiction and stuff, is that you're expected to be the best version of yourself at all times in all those situations. And it becomes really hard and frustrating. And then the things like what you just mentioned, Chris, like we were talking about, like the room is half full and you're looking out in the audience going, crap, we may not be able to pay ourselves this month because we've had several shows in a row that weren't sold out. Those things start creeping in and the business realities really set in, and it can lead to burnout. That doesn't mean I was worried that we were going to have to give up, but it's just, it can be something that robs the joy. And so, yeah, I think how to deal is you got to allow yourself room to rest, being one of the big things. Just, it's okay to take a break, whether that's for a few weeks, months, whatever.
Yeah, and which is easier to do when your entire income isn't dependent upon the music. But one reason I think we don't rest is because we all suffer from some kind of FOMO. Like, oh, if I take a year off, I'm going to get old and I'm going to be irrelevant. It's just a year, or, if I take 2 months off, whatever amount of time it is, it feels like in that break, someone else is going to muscle in and become the latest star and steal what's yours. Well, that's ridiculous thinking, but like, I get why it happens. I've felt it before. I can't take a break. I can't slow down. I'll lose something. And I think a kind of natural antidote to that sort of FOMO is like, if you have other passions, like for a while I got really into poetry and it sort of took my focus off of music in a really healthy way. So artistically I had something else kind of competing. So I let myself rest. What other outlets that may not have anything to do with creativity, maybe it's sports or just any other subject you could get invested in. And then just the simple fact of having responsibilities you can't shirk is like kind of a dose of reality to force you. Like for me, like having a family, becoming a parent, it's like, oh yeah, like even if I wanted to, I can't burn the candle like that because my family needs me, So
yeah.
Anyways, those are some ways I think of getting out of the constant grind mindset.
Yeah. And, the FOMO thing is real. Like what you described was exactly what, when I was doing it full time, like if we stop, someone else will steal our thunder. Even when like the time when Hello Morning was playing a lot in Portland, and that was around the time you were playing a lot in Portland, it felt like if we don't keep this going, we'll be forgotten in the scene. And so that can really creep in and drive that burnout as well. Like feeling like you're constantly in a hamster wheel, or like you're running down something or running from something that you just can't escape. And so anyway,
another thing I think that feeds the FOMO and that fear of stopping is like you're constantly, or at least at a certain point, I was always comparing myself to other artists in the scene. And like, what do I have, or what do they have that I feel like I deserve? And why don't I have it? I need to keep going, like keep fighting. Don't take a break. When those sorts of comparisons are usually really unhealthy and counterproductive as well. Yeah. But it was a reason I sort of felt desperate to keep going. And then one other thing I was thinking of is I have felt like at certain points in my musical career that I had musical collaborators, but I kind of resented this pattern I found myself in, where I felt like I was doing all the work, like all the business side of the work, the marketing, the booking of whatever, the scheduling practices, putting up posters, managing all the social stuff, like whatever the work is. I felt like I was doing it all. And then those other people got to participate in the fun, like the music making side of it. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, I could have dealt with that by simply being more direct in my stating what I needed from them. Like, I'm feeling burnt out. Will you take this task on? You know, would you be willing to manage our social presence or whatever it is? And I think that may have meant having to give up some amount of creative control. You know, if you're asking other people to buy in with their effort, well, maybe they need to buy into the control of the art as well. So that's whatever, you know, as a balance there of what you're willing to give up in exchange for help. But I think I could have done a much better job of being direct with my needs so that I didn't get burnt out.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Next up, we have creative differences. This one is tough. You know, disagreements with bandmates or producers can crush the joy of making music in the first place. You know, this is something I feel that I've experienced in one situation, not with Small Town Poets. It was always funny to me because we were just so easygoing. I don't think we ever really had like any big band argument. We had times where, you know, you're living on top of each other for weeks and weeks on end. You're going to get irritated with people, and when you're not sleeping well. But I would hear stories of other bands just like going at it nonstop. It was just like a constant brawl about everything. And I was like, wow, how could you live that way? But I have experienced the creative differences things where you're like, man, can we just get on the same page? We're so close to making something great, and it just not happening.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had like the disastrous creative differences experience with anyone I've worked with, but I know what it's like to sort of constantly feel like maybe you're not achieving what's in your head, which could be a creative difference with yourself in a way between the ideal and what you're able to achieve. But more what I mean is like, okay, I can't play the accordion or whatever, and I want an accordion on a song. So you hire someone or you ask a friend to come play, and inevitably they're not going to do exactly what's in your mind, right? Yeah. So then you have to struggle with, can I live with this person's contribution, which actually may be amazing and way better than what you're stuck on in your own head, but you have to kind of get rid of the notion that it will all be exactly like what you imagined. So it's sort of like constant low grade creative differences. And what I've found is like, I think I'm a happier person when I let them put their imprint on the song. You know, like you shape things, you work with them to get it close, but to not feel like it's got to be like absolutely my way or the highway, or I'm deleting the track. Like, cause then you're just, I don't know, a dictator. It's like a Steely Dan record all of a sudden.
Well, I think one thing that I've found that why I love being in a band so much is that I feel like there's this musical trust that is earned and learned over time. And part of that is that everyone comes into a situation with, you know, even if everyone sounds like by the words they're saying sounds like they're in agreement on what is going to happen or what the creative direction is. In reality, everybody still has a different image in their head. But then when you learn how to work together and then you let go and realize that the whole is greater than the parts, and what you're creating is something different, not a Kevin Bruner solo album with these guys or these people. It's like, this is something that I get to contribute to, but what we do is going to be our new thing. That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. And that takes time and trust. And, you know, it does take a lot of conversation. And oftentimes it goes with like any relationship where issues just don't get discussed until it's a boiling point. And then it all comes crashing down. And that can really rob the joy. And sometimes it just means you're mismatched with people.
That's true.
That's a reality of it. But Um, I for some reason the scene. Have you seen That Thing You Do?
Yeah, but it's been a really long time.
When he meets Del Paxton, like the famous jazz player, and he's just enamored by him. They're at this like jazz club, and he's just freaking out that he gets to meet him. And the advice he gives him is like, bands come and go. He's like, man, I've been in bands that some that only lasted 2 months, and that was 2 months too long. It's like, I'm like, truer words have never been said, you know?
Well, I think I was thinking of mentioning something very similar to what you just said, which is just when you go into a collaboration, you have to leave some mental space for the compromise. It's going to be inevitable. And I don't think there's a correct answer to this, but what's more important, like strict adherence to your vision or teamwork? And different scenarios may call for different balances between those two things. But yeah, and then you said just don't let it boil over and like explode all at once. I think there's more proactive ways to address this, and some of the ideas I sometimes think of, or that from history, like even like the Beatles, that Get Back documentary. There's a scene towards the end where you actually hear John and George talking about their creative need to have solo projects. And it was under the guise of, if we can go and have our own thing that we totally control, we can actually feel more excited about this and keep the Beatles going. Now, of course, it didn't happen. I don't think Paul ever heard that, but like just saying, hey, one solution to these differences is to give ourselves a realm in which we don't have to compromise, so that these compromises are more palatable. I think even you could do that within a project where you sort of trade off on a balance of who gets to write the songs or who's in charge of production. Like, maybe I don't know how that would work really in practice, but like just trading who gets to be in charge.
Yeah. And this can even be a challenge for solo artists. When you're in a creative situation and having to guide people who don't want your opinion, and you're like, okay, we're down a road here. I've paid a lot of money. Do I pull the plug or what do I do? And there is a point for compromise, and there's a point for this is a mismatch, and being able to know where that line is just to protect your own sanity. But don't let it be just fester. That's the thing. Like the bottom line would be, don't let it fester in a way where it drives you to want to quit making music, because that's the wrong answer. It's funny because the person that was playing guitar in Small Town Poets, they weren't called Small Town Poets yet. They had been a different band, and they were kind of replacing some people and wanted to form something new, but they had a whole tour booked. The guitar player that they had before me, he's far more accomplished. He's a incredible studio musician, producer in Nashville, and they didn't gel together on the bus and all the places where you just have to be. I always say you got to be a cool hang. If you're challenging to be around, or personalities clash, at some point it's going to stop mattering how good you are at your instrument. And they got me in the mix, and we just clicked. I was much more junior in my skills, but the creative differences were gone, and that made it easier to move forward.
This is probably the least pertinent thing I'll say to the conversation, but with creative differences, I'm remembering probably countless times of being in the studio as a session player and feeling like I've come up with some amazing hook or whatever, some crazy sound that will just make this song so much cooler than it is. And then them being like, it's kind of weird, or it doesn't fit. And then I'm like, well, this isn't my project. So I can very easily be like, whatever, don't care, do whatever you want. But in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's not a compromise, but creative differences that you don't force because you're the one being paid.
Yeah. Yep. We had that experience recently, but I won't mention here.
Oh, was it me? Was I forcing one of my keyboard parts?
No.
On the melody record?
No. No, it wasn't you, Chris.
Actually, fortunate for y'all in that setting, I didn't have my normal keyboard stuff, so it was this real, I thought, pretty cheesy sounding placeholder kind of keyboard. So I was like not doing much. So I played it very safe with you guys, and then I didn't have to feel disappointed.
No, that was great. That was great. Next up, this one was interesting. This was the one that ChatGPT pulled up that I would not have thought of, but is absolutely true. Number 5, changing musical trends. Musical styles and trends are always evolving. So artists and bands can end up in a situation where they feel like their musical style is no longer appreciated. And you can kind of be feeling like, what next? How do I move on? We were big this period we were in, we were huge. And now we're not. Where does that leave us? The biggest, insane example I've ever seen of this in my life, and times were very different. So it's a little different now, because to me now I feel like everything is popular and nothing's popular at once. That's what I feel about now. Like whatever you want to be into, you can find it online. But I remember my senior year in high school, MTV at that time would debut new artists that they were unsure about on Sundays. And Smells Like Teen Spirit debuted on Sunday. At the time,
120 minutes,
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the time, it had gotten to the ridiculousness of hair metal. Like you had the ones that you still know of today, but it was like 5-6 layers deep of like ridiculous copycat after copycat. But that's what was everywhere. Nirvana comes out, and on Monday, and I remember someone saying, "Did you guys see that Nirvana video?" By Wednesday, everyone had gone and bought that album, and it was literally by the weekend, everyone was done. Hair metal was over. It was the stupidest thing ever. Why did we ever like it? And it was insane to see, because part of it, why I always think about that is like, I don't know if that could happen anymore. The way today, like I said, with social media, you can be involved with whatever you want. There, like only certain media outlets really drove what you could consume outside of what you bought and listened to at home. So if you were in one, I remember all those hair metal bands just like going from sold out tours to couldn't get a gig at a local club for 100 people. And just overnight, it just evaporated. It was wild to watch. And so those things can happen. I don't think it happens to that extreme as much anymore, but it can happen. Trends come and go, and you can feel like you're left holding the bag and everyone's gone.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good example, because what changed was that particular group of musicians' access to the massive media and that sort of level of pop stardom. And so, yeah, if you're judging your merit or whatever on that, then I think changing trends can be a danger to you. If you're a little bit more like, I don't know, grassroots about it, I think the lesson might be, hey, 5 or 6 years later, those same bands were playing clubs and filling them. Maybe there was 250 people there instead of 20,000. But, as long as they didn't become as long as they didn't become disasters of humans, which I know happened to some of them, then they could have had careers that continued, and many of them did. What are you laughing at?
All of it.
Yeah. Well,
I had a picture in my head that I feel like what happens for a lot of these artists, because there are definite songwriting styles that people have and adopt in all genres, and musical production styles that people gravitate towards. And no matter how old you are or how young you are, this will happen to you. So be prepared. But there are ways where you're somebody that, I'm a guitar player, so of course I like guitar-driven music. There is guitar-driven music always being made, even though the glory days of rock and roll are behind us for now. I think there's a new rock revolution on the horizon, led by the women playing guitar, because so many women have picked up guitar in recent years. It's amazing to see as a father of 2 daughters. So I think there's going to be a new rock revolution that looks different. But I'm always interested in good guitar playing, but it shows up in all sorts of ways in modern music, and staying relevant and having an ear to what's current and happening is important. I think a lot of the artists that struggle with this feel like they just stopped at some point. Like they stopped enjoying music. They got that same Def Leppard t-shirt that they wear from,
right.
In a non-ironic or cool way, but just like they just gave up and then just stopped growing and changing musically. I think that's the key. It's important to continue to grow, but your songwriting style can still exist. There's fans of all types of music. I mean, I lately have been hearing people talk about 90s music constantly, which makes my heart happy. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to listen to or crave new and interesting sounds and new production techniques and things that artists do with guitars and keys. Like, I think it's just continuing to take care of your musical side and feed that as well.
Yeah, and I think there's two ways to take it. One is to say, like you said, there's a fans for everything. So if what you used to make was really trendy and now it's more niche, that's totally okay. Keep doing it. I'm sure you'll do it well and you'll find the people who love you for it. That's one way to take it, because those fans are out there. If you start sort of introducing some newer styles into your stuff, that's great too, because then you'll be kind of constantly evolving and you're kind of bridging a gap between people who like your original style and maybe some newer styles. But yeah, there's fans for everything. That being said, I feel like my like musical source material for me is like 60s and 70s folk and classic rock, 90s rock and Brit pop, and then like 2001 to 2010 like indie rock stuff. And like that's a pretty wide thing, but now in 2023 those influences cause me to make music that sometimes I'm like, oh, does this sound dated? And maybe it does to someone who's 15, but do I care? No. Like, I just need enough people to like it for what it is. So
yeah, in one of the notes we have here, like, divorce yourself from the expectations of modern pop stardom. And there's fans for everything. Keep doing what you're passionate about, and think of your career efforts as nurturing a community and not about trendiness. Trendiness comes insanely fast now in the social media world. Like, you're on TikTok, there's a trend that everybody's doing now, and then
a week later it's gone.
It's stupid. Yeah. It's like so that's where it's like, being aware is good, but not being sucked in like you have to be all things to everybody. But I'll talk to artists sometimes that are like, nobody likes us anymore, we can't connect, we don't do the music that people want. And oftentimes it's like, you need to feed yourself, your musician side, with continue to keep feeding yourself with more new and modern music. It's one of these trends I've seen, that people tend to kind of lock in their musical taste, most people, around college age. And then with life and everything else, they're busy doing other things. They're not hyper music fans. Of course, there are hyper music fans at all ages, but that tends to be the case. And you got to just make time to keep absorbing new things and understand new artists that are worth checking out, that are doing interesting things that are outside of your comfort zone. The other thing is, you can experience it in a real modern way. And this is what I feel like we experienced with Hello Morning. At the time when we were playing in Portland, everything, this is when Portland music scene was exploding, and every artist, it's like every band, every artist, you had to have multiple people with beards and at least one banjo on stage. Otherwise, nobody cared. And we were this rock band that, we got compared to like Radiohead and Muse and Britpop type bands. And we've had a lot of placements in film and TV with the music, but at the time we had a hard time getting traction in Portland because that's not what they wanted. We actually had one of the local radio stations, rock stations, playing one of our songs, and they said, man, if you guys would move to LA, you'd be huge, but Portland just doesn't want this.
The Decemberists' influence on Portland was large.
Yes. So we chose rock and roll obscurity instead of moving to LA.
True to your sound and true to your geography.
That's right. All right. The last one we have, number 6, no support system. Oftentimes artists and musicians don't have people around them that can offer support during challenging times, which can, feel lonely and ultimately maybe some hopelessness, or just the idea of giving up, that there's not people around you that can identify and understand what you're going through and the challenges you face as an artist.
Well, my first bit of advice, if you're falling into this category, is come to the DIY musician VIP experience in Nashville. Joking plug, but also totally serious, because our conferences are amazing events for community and a sense of understanding and just being with people who get it and who can, offer advice. But sometimes you don't even need advice. You just need someone to hear you gripe and to know they understand. So if that's you, join us in Nashville. It'll be really fun and a good experience. But if that's not an option, I think seeking something similar in your town is really important, whether that's like an official kind of local musicians meetup. Sometimes they're hosted by musicians unions or local music industry groups. Maybe you're in a small town that doesn't have a music industry group. Go to an open mic, go to a garage show, whatever the version of where musicians are hanging out. Just go meet them and talk. And I bet you'll find a sense of understanding and relief and camaraderie in some way.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I was going to say is sometimes this feeling that we don't have a support network is more to do with our own professional or family communities, I guess, kind of feeling like they're not showing up or they don't understand how important it is to us. And then I think the antidote to that is like direct conversations, like, not that you want to go and badger all your coworkers to like desperately come to your show, but just like, hey, this is a really big show for me. If you're going to ever come to one of my shows, like, I'm really excited about this one. Like, it's okay to ask. And then with your family, like, to say, I take this seriously. Like, this is a big album for me. I'm going to need to focus for whatever it is to record it, or just ask for the time. And not to say they're going to give you everything you want, but they might give you a lot of what you want and need, which is a form of support. So
yeah, you know what? When you were talking, it made me think of, you might need to just have a frank conversation saying, this is what supporting me looks like. This is what supporting me does not look like. Showing up to Thanksgiving dinner and telling me I should be on American Idol, that is not supporting me. That is giving me the big middle finger, just so you know. I know you think you're being helpful, but you sound like an idiot. That's or offering unsolicited advice, like they know something about the music business that you don't. There may be times where people can't. I don't want it to sound like nobody can give you advice, but like I've had I posted about this before, where at one point my grandma was like, "Oh, you should move to Branson, Missouri, because that's where the whole music business is now." And I'm like, no,
that's where the whole music business from the 40s through the 70s is now.
That and care about went to, but that's not. I'm not in that demographic. So stuff like that can really be irritating, where they think they're being helpful because they're just trying to make conversation. So telling people, this is what supporting me looks like. This is what patronizing me looks like.
Yeah.
And yeah, all those things that yeah. So anyway, that can be a challenge. I know for a lot of people that is probably one of the bigger challenges, just because those people that are in your life in that way their words can be very damaging very quickly in more ways than we often like to admit. Like if a stranger said that to you, you're like, what a loser. but
well, and there's also that thing that can happen with people in your either close or extended family who are older than you, where you will always be what their version of you is,
Yes.
You're always going to be a 7-year-old to them. So even if you have achieved success and are, you're very much an adult with things to honor and respect about your life choices, you're just a stupid kid to them. So maybe there's at some point you give up on trying to get support from them, but first try the thing of just being specific about what you need.
Yeah, I think a lot of that in this situation, just saying, here's what supporting me looks like. This would be helpful if you did these things. These things I don't need. I know, I don't need you to constantly be pointing out my failures. I am living and breathing failure. I'm a musician.
It's the air I breathe.
It's the air I breathe. Okay, so throw me a bone someplace else. um. Anyway, that's not the reality of it. I think as artists, we're just so hard on ourselves that we have big ambitions, and we believe in ourselves, and that's the thing. Ultimately, as an artist, you have to understand that you have to believe in yourself more than anybody, because that's what you're basically selling people on you. And so finding ways to deal with these challenges so you can power through is important. Talking to people is important. That's why we do things like the DIY Musician VIP experience, because I've been to many music conferences before then, but before we did the DIY Musician Conference, it was all about like learning and stuff. But once we did, for me, it was about being with my tribe, people that get it, that I could have those things like, hey, did you experience this as well? Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm not alone. Thank goodness, and you may get that some in your local scene, but it's really important to set aside time where you're just in it with people. Because I never really experienced that playing local gigs with other bands. We'd have conversations, but when you're at something like the DIY Musician VIP experience, it's a totally different vibe.
Well, sometimes in like a local scene, like, I mean, I'm talking about Portland, Oregon, which at the time was, very active. Like the entire national spotlight was on Portland. So there could be ways in which it maybe not cutthroat, because I think it was fairly supportive, but it didn't feel like the type of scene where you'd go hang out with another band and then like spend the whole time complaining and needing like soul nurturing. It was more like posturing. How can I get a gig with this group? It was a little more like, what's the term? I don't know.
Putting up a front. I mean,
a little bit of a front. Yeah.
Because you're kind of like that competitive spirit comes in, like we got to be cool to these dudes or this crew or
or
this
people look up
band.
to you and think, I feel like that people may have seen me and thought, oh, I admire what you have with press quotes or whatever. There's always some thing you can sort of envy about someone else, and then it's like, well, I don't want to actually be like, for all that, I feel like crap in these ways, because then you're chipping away at that front. It's like, oh, it feels good to be admired, so.
Yeah.
Last thing I wanted to say on this is sometimes your support system may be your audience, and artists I know have different comfort levels with sort of looking at their audience as a street team or as a group you can galvanize to get specific things done, besides just paying attention to you or buying your merch. But I think there might be some super fans amongst your audience who would be willing to help you book a gig or whatever it is. If you need design help, there may be the support you need within your existing audience.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that's good about social media, is that I feel like the vulnerability is someplace where you can really find that support from your audience, the people that really get it. And actually, even before social media, some of the most amazing moments we've had on the road were not when we had a big sold out show or whatever. It was when a fan just came and saw our need and cared for us, and us allowing them to do that. That was really moving. And so you got to allow yourself to be vulnerable for people to recognize that you guys have a need and I want to take care of it. Whether sometimes it was like, we haven't had a good meal in a long time and someone take us out to dinner, or sometimes people inviting you to their house, it would be kind of sketchy. Like, what are we walking into? Are we going to now are they going to let us relax? Because part of the reason why is like, when you start being able to afford a hotel is nice, because you can have that downtime where I don't have to be on for somebody and be performing and be who they think I am. And, but when someone would provide their home and just like, we're going to just let you relax and hang out and provide for your needs, and you can be you. Those times were amazing, because, and sometimes you'll find that in your fan community, or they just write you a note that hits you out of the blue, and you're just like, wow, that gave me the energy I needed to keep going. Like that one I shared in the keynote where that person told us that, I need you to tell you, your song got me through the darkest time of my life. And those things just make it all worth it when you realize there's people that really care and appreciate what you do.
And to tie it back to our very first point about pushing through the frustration, or maybe it was the second point, lack of immediate confirmation of rewards, a lot of times the things that come back to you as the most meaningful things you didn't even know were happening in the moment. Like that person who you changed their life in a dark time, you didn't know that in the moment. You probably didn't even know that for 10 or 15 years, but it was happening. And later it returns to you because you pushed through, you kept playing, and now you're doing a show at their house.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, if you've had any thoughts or comments about what we've said or want to weigh in on some other topic, you can do so. We have our listener line at 360-524-2209, or you can email us at podcast@cdbabypodcast.com. And we have one call for today. Yeah, feel free to, we've had a bit of a dry spell. We always go through like feast or famine. And so, weigh in on a topic. Email us, give us a call. And let's see, we've got one that talks about AI. So let's get to it.
Hey, Kevin and Chris, this is Sin. I'm at Sin Spoken Word on all social media or sinspokenword.com. Really enjoyed the last few episodes, and one of the kind of recurring themes lately has been AI, and I'm just starting to form these thoughts on it, so I just kind of wanted to hear somebody else weigh in. My day job is in the data space. It's not near the data science space, more in the analytics side of things, but my understanding of the way AI works now as it pertains to musicians is it basically is very good at taking the common traits of what's already popular and then replicating it. And so I don't know that we will ever do away with human artists just because of the simple fact that at some point it can't just copy itself and it would need humans to copy. As music evolves and changes, that evolution and change, I imagine, needs to be driven by humans and not AI. Otherwise, it just becomes a sort of a caricature of itself. I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong. I'm not super deep into data science and AI, but just based on my impression and my understanding, that is, at least hopefully gives some hope for artists. Now, the problem, I think, comes in the fact that there is no really protection for the data or the metadata about your intellectual property online. And so as long as artists are creating new music and evolving genres and moving art forward, unless some protections are in place, AI will always have free reign to copy that and make a reproduction of it. Would love to hear somebody in the community that has some more knowledge on this space has an opinion on it, and would love to hear their thoughts. Love the podcast, guys. Looking forward to seeing you at the next conference. Peace.
Yeah, that's one thing that, AI is trying to make decisions based on information it has and can make new and interesting things, but it could go in a whole bunch of different directions that it thinks are great that the humans hate. So,
well, it seemed it's an interesting question because it seemed like he was describing something that gets smaller and smaller and smaller in terms of options because its data set or whatever you want to say is finite. But I think you could, I don't know much about how AI works or anything, but you could almost turn it inside out and say, that, well, if it has, all that data, you could sort of randomize how it combines things to spin outwards with infinite new combinations. And not to say people will like all of that, but it'll also have, fairly quick metrics about how people respond to it so that the random acts of creativity and combination and synthesis it's doing, it can do more of what people like and then just keep combining things infinitely. I just say that I think it might not be as limited as that position. But the other thing, I don't know how people who work in AI are accounting for it, but there is that thing like specific to music where you don't like things. Sometimes the things you love most, you didn't love at first. So I don't know how technology compensates for that. Like I'm sure people who are smart have thought about that, but maybe the pop music of AI wouldn't allow for ample just getting past the agitation of not liking it so that you can eventually as a human be like, oh, I do love this. And instead it's just spinning out stuff that people love on the first go around, but maybe there isn't a whole lot there.
Well, and also half the time as humans, we don't know what we want anyway.
That's true. So we're just happy to press play and let it do its thing.
Well, not even that, but it's like we're unpredictable. Like it's hard to predict what people will like. That's what's so interesting about music in the first place. And one of the things that fascinates me about being a musician and making music and putting out in the world, that sometimes things I think are going to connect so well don't. And I'm confused by it. And other things that I think are going to be like, nobody cares about this one, will be the big hit.
That's the one.
Nobody. So it's that's why it's like, that's why to me, the whole idea of it's fascinating. It's like, how do you predict what's unpredictable?
Mm-hmm.
Because like oftentimes, like I think about like some of the songwriter contests I've heard. It's like the winning song will be, that checks all the right boxes, but I don't ever care to listen to that again. Like I enjoyed it when it was happening, but it felt like too predictable.
Well, it's like the food comparison people make. It's like, it's a Reese's peanut butter cup versus like a really great chef who's making some special one night only. It's like, I don't know. The pop music is the peanut butter cup.
Yes.
I shouldn't say pop music, but what you're talking about, the music that sounds like someone checked a bunch of boxes.
You just made me think of what I think is a great idea. I've been hooked on that show, Next Level Chef. Have you seen it?
Are you going to create Next Level Songwriter?
Because there are different levels with different, like the top level has like the state of the art kitchen.
Oh,
the
haven't seen this.
The middle level has your normal like commercial kitchen. The bottom level is like more like home appliances and stuff. And they're competing against each other and they get different ingredients. It would be amazing to do that with music.
Yeah.
I'd watch that show.
Heck yeah.
So,
all right.
I don't know.
Whatever network might be listening.
That's right. Chris and I will co-host that show. Next Level Musician. All right. Well, Chris, by the time people hear this episode, it'll probably be seamless with your sabbatical, but I hope you enjoy your time off.
Thank you. I will.
And I feel like I had good hair today.
Yeah, it didn't look like it moved. Unlike
I don't think it did.
Like a squirrel.
A squirrel.
Got a dead squirrel on my head again.
All right. Well, again, reminder, if you made it this far on the podcast and you really do want to connect with Chris and I, go follow us on social media at Chris Robley, at K Bruner. And we'd love to connect with you there and follow along with some of the things and projects we have going on. And yeah, you can sign up for some mentoring and all that. And we hope to see you at the DIY Musician VIP experience in Nashville in May. It's going to be an awesome event. Go on over to DIYmusiciancon.com to get your tickets. And with that, we will call it for this episode.
See you then.